Hi everyone, Courtney Whitley here for the final video presentation of my research. My project is on the impact of classroom placement on students with emotional behavior disorders. I teach sixth grade resource classes and inclusion classes for math, and this year alone I've had 5 students expelled from the school, and they've either went to the psychoeducational center or our county's alternative center. And a lot of questions have went through my mind about, if their placement would have been different, if they would still be with us. At our school, we only have the inclusion, or they can have access to the resource room, but that's only for a very small portion of the day. We do not have the self-contained placement, and it's really sad because we had one student who came to us from Washington, D.C., who had been in self-contained his entire life with no more than 8 students in his classroom, and we put him in full inclusion because that's what we have with access to the resource room. And of course, he had many, many, many meltdowns, got into a lot of fights, and he actually ended up at our psychoeducational center. But I do wonder if the self-contained placement had worked for him in the past, if it would have continued working for him if we had had that as an option. So I hope you enjoy my study. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint to share with you. Okay. So the impact of classroom placement on students with emotional behavior disorder. What is an emotional behavior disorder? From the Code of Federal Rules and Regulations, an emotional and behavior disorder is defined as the inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and or teachers for preschool children. This would include their care providers. The inability to learn, which cannot be adequately explained by intellectual, sensory, or other health factors. 3, a consistent or chronic inappropriate type of behavior or feelings under normal conditions. 4, displayed pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. And 5, the displayed tendency to develop physical symptoms, pains, or unreasonable fears associated with personal or school problems. So as you can see in these definitions, there is no cookie cutter what is EBD. There's so many kids and there's so many issues that they have. What placement is right for them? Some of the options that there are, of course, is the inclusion, which is in a general education setting where a special ed teacher comes in with them. A self-contained classroom, which typically has less than 10 students and a peer pro, or a separate school option, which, in our county is the psychoeducational center. So the issue is that they can be placed in a variety of different environments depending on the severity and the availability. But the questions are, how does that classroom placement impact them academically? Does being in a small group or at a separate school or inclusion have an impact on their test scores? Socially, would these placements have issues or impacts on their peer interactions and initiating social interactions with peers and teachers? And emotionally, as far as how do they perceive their self when it comes to being at school, and how many meltdowns do they have? When in the different placements, what is the difference in their time on task? How do they feel about their placement and where they are? Research on the self-contained classroom in the past 5 years is lacking. I'm sure most of you know that there's been a major push for inclusion. However, it has been found that inclusion can be a stressful environment for students with emotional behavior disorders and takes a toll on their education. one study found that students in the general education setting in California had higher rates of disruptive behavior and lower rates of academic engagement than students who were in the self-contained placements in Pennsylvania. Mattson found that the students at the self-contained school had lower test scores than those in the self-contained classroom. So we're looking to figure out which placement is best for these students and how does it impact them. So for our study, of course, the participants will be middle school students with emotional behavior disorder. It's also important to note that if they have another eligibility on top of emotional behavior disorder, then they wouldn't be included in the participants. They will range in age from 11 to 15 years old and be in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade classes in Gwinnett County Public Schools, which is located near Atlanta, Georgia. Trickham Middle School, Five Forks Middle School, McConnell Middle School, Burtmar Middle School, and Couch Middle School are all good schools with good testing history and achievement. North Metro is a special school. It is a psychoeducational center that only has self-contained classrooms. So the way that I've broken it up is into 3 groups. The first group would be the students who are at the separate school, which is North Metro. That is one limitation to this study, is that I wish that there were other schools that we could look at, but this is the only school in the county for students with emotional behavior disorders who needed to be at a separate school. Group 2 will be students who are served in a separate class from the other students in the other 5 schools, so the self-contained setting. And then group 3 will be those students who are served in the inclusion setting. This is a mixed methods research project. The first thing that we will use is a survey called How I Like My School. It's a questionnaire that focuses on 3 areas: self-image, personal achievements, and the student feelings about school. The questionnaire will use a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being strongly agree and 1 being strongly disagree. Students will complete the questionnaire 3 times, once at the beginning of the year, once in the middle of the year, and once at the end of the year. This is a new questionnaire that would be developed and have to be piloted for reliability and validity through field tests. Some of the questions that would be on the survey would be: I feel comfortable at school. I have lots of friends. And then the students would say, I strongly disagree, I strongly agree. And then they would complete this at the beginning, middle, and end of the year. Also, the Georgia Milestones test would be used to show the data for their academic information. It's the comprehensive summative assessment program that all students in the state of Georgia take at the end of their grade level for 6th, 7th, and 8th. It measures the knowledge and skills outlined in the state-adopted content standards in language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. It contains open-ended items in language arts and mathematics, a written component, and norm reference items in all content areas. And the Georgia Milestones test was developed by the Georgia Department of Education, who is currently working on analyzing the data for reliability and validity. The other instrument is that there will be researchers who are doing observations. These researchers will conduct observations at the school once a week in 30-minute time intervals for the entire school year. They'll be looking at students' time on task. Time on task will be defined as the time that the student is following directions and participating in his or her own learning. They will also look for the students initiating peer and teacher interactions. The design of the study will be the mixed methods research study. It will include surveys, test scores, and observations, and the study will take 1 academic year, being that it will not be a longitudinal study. The procedures will be that researchers will gain permission from the county, and then each individual school, once permission is granted from those locations, permission slips along with letters explaining the study will go home to students with emotional behavior disorders during the first week of school. If they don't bring it back, then phone calls will be made home in hopes of getting in contact with the parents and talking to them about the study. Once permission is granted, students will complete their first set of questionnaires, and the researchers will begin to do the classroom observations once a week. When it comes to analyzing the data, the study will use descriptive statistics to look for correlations between classroom placement, emotional profiles, behavioral profiles, and academic profiles. Researchers will collect data from the observations and surveys. They will get the academic data, the 2016 Georgia Milestones test scores from the schools that are participating. Bivariate data tables will be used to look for mean variables, and the data analysis will show how students who are in different placements perceive their social interactions, how they achieve academically, and how they behave in the classroom.